Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. The PGA Tour heads to Olympia Fields this week for the BMW Championship. And Lucas Glover, he is going on quite the run right now, going for win number 3 after he won the Wyndham and the FedEx St. Jude Championship. The last golfer to win 3 in a row, that was Dustin Johnson, back in 2017. Lucas Glover looking to do that. He's currently sitting 4th in the FedEx Cup standings. Taking a look, we got Jon Rahm sitting at the top. It's real close between him and Scotty, 148 points between Jon Rahm and Scotty Scheffler. Then we have Rory looking to win his 4th FedEx Cup, followed by Lucas Glover and then Patrick Cantlay rounding out the top 5. All right, let's get into it with CBS Sports golf writers and hosts of the First Cut podcast, Rick Gehman and Kyle Porter. Guys, let's start talking about Lucas Glover in the top 5 of the FedEx Cup standings. The ball striking, the putting, it all is working for him right now. He goes from, I think, 49 to 4th in those standings recently. KP, I'll start with you. Can you just speak to the heater that this guy is on right now?
Well, it's been extraordinary. Rick and I have actually had a hard time sort of parsing it out on the First Cut podcast, even as we've dove into the stats and gone through every hole and every round that he's played. It's just there's not really a precedent for this. You know, the numbers that you just mentioned of him moving from, you know, way outside the FedEx Cup. He was 185th, Jacqueline, after the Memorial back in June. Now he's 4th with 8 rounds left in the season. So it's just not something that has happened before. And I think it's a remarkable story because of that, but also because of his age. You know, into his kind of early 40s, you kind of think your career is what it is. And now all of a sudden we're talking about, could he win $18 million at the Tour Championship next week? Could he be on the Ryder Cup here in about a month in Rome? Those are remarkable questions for somebody who, again, 8 weeks ago, was 185th in the FedEx Cup standings.
Yeah, looking at it from the first 20 to the last few is just remarkable there for Glover. All right, so last week's runner-up, Patrick Cantlay, looking for his 3rd straight BMW Championship. Rick, how do you like his chances to win it once again?
Yeah, while Lucas Glover is trying to win 3 weeks in a row, Patrick Cantlay trying to win this event 3 years in a row. And what I think is most impressive about the first 2 victories under his belt is that they've come at different golf courses, right? This event has been played at 7 different golf courses over the last 7 years. They kind of bop it around all over the place. We're going back to Olympia Fields this time around where we were in 2020. And I think this is actually probably one of the better setups for Patrick Cantlay. I think a lot of people don't realize what a good driver of the golf ball that Cantlay is. And when you look at the way that Olympia Fields lays out, there are fairways that are about 25 yards wide at that 300-yard mark. They're very, very narrow. So the ability to hit it far and straight is going to allow some of these guys to start on second base. And I think that sets up really well for Cantlay. And it's hard to argue with the form, considering, as you mentioned, Jacqueline, he finished his runner-up in a playoff last week to Lucas Glover. He's probably brimming with plenty of confidence going back to try to defend his title for a 2nd consecutive time, 3 in total. So hard not to think that Patrick Cantlay is not going to be in the mix come Sunday afternoon.
Another guy who is seemingly always in the mix is Jon Rahm. He has a good track record at Olympia Fields. He won there in 2020, holds the scoring record for a single round there as well. So KP, what do you think we're going to see from Jon Rahm come the weekend?
Well, it was interesting. You know, last week at TPC Southwind, he talked about how he felt rested going into the Open Championship and then on into these playoffs. He said he got really kind of worn out and tired around, you know, late spring, early summer. That's not like a shocking thing for somebody that won the Masters, and that, you know, emotionally it's a difficult thing to kind of ever recover from throughout the rest of the season. And so now, you know, he feels recovered, but he didn't play that well last week at Memphis. So I'm pretty interested to see what we get from Rahm. He really struggled off the tee at TPC Southwind, which he was able to kind of bounce back from, played all right on the weekend, posted a decent finish, maintained his #1 ranking in the FedEx Cup standings, but him and Scotty Scheffler both had a massive lead going into last week, that first playoff event. He will not maintain that lead if he plays this week like he did last week. I think if he straightens driver out, Jacqueline, I think he has a chance to win this golf tournament. He was one of my plays on the podcast. He was like 9-1, 10-1, something like that to win here. I like how he's playing. I need him to straighten driver out just a little bit to try and put a score together and maybe get what would be his 5th win of the season.
I'm glad that Kyle mentioned his driver, because that was the big outlier last week in Memphis. He lost strokes off the tee, which is something that he never does, and he had single-handedly the worst round of his career with the driver. He just could not stop hitting it in the water all around TPC Southwind, and he starts to put himself in a lot of awkward positions, and you're behind the 8-ball when that is usually the thing that allows him to separate from the rest of the field. So I think this is a really good opportunity to bounce back. Olympia Fields is long. It's over 7,300 yards as a par 70. It is narrow, as we've already talked about, and there is not the amount of water lurking that can get you in trouble off the tee. So this is a much better driving course for Jon Rahm. So if he gets that figured out, which I believe we're going to get a bounce back. There's no reason to think that we are not. The rest of his game should be able to be strong enough to put himself in the mix. So I love Rahm's chances for this week to try to put, as Kyle mentioned, another victory on the resume.
And guys, when we look at the FedEx Cup standings, obviously Rahm is right there, and Scotty is just under him, 148 points behind at number 2. If anything, Scotty, our guy, is consistent. He's got the most top 10 finishes on tour. But Rick, we know that the putting has been an issue for him on tour this season.
Yeah, it's been a big issue, and that flat stick is actually something that he's using a new prototype from TaylorMade that he put in the bag, because it's been such a struggle on the putting surfaces. I think that, for the vast majority of the year, I've been a 10 out of 10 on Scotty Scheffler. I think at this point I'm about a 9.5 out of 10. I got to give him a little bit of a downgrade. He was not as sharp from tee to green last week in Memphis, and the problem with that is for the entire year he has been able to out-hit this really sour putter. And if you are still putting very poorly and you're not that elite, historic tee to green player that we've seen for the vast majority of the year, the math stops adding up for Scotty Scheffler. So that is one little bit of a concern. The good news for him is how intertwined this event is with the Tour Championship next week, and obviously the first leg that we saw last week. His ability to be such a high floor golfer and rack up those FedEx Cup points, no matter how it shapes up this week, he's going to be in the mix. He's going to be one of the guys that controls his own destiny when we get to East Lake next week. So I don't think he has to do anything crazy. This needs to be a tune-up. He's got to figure out what's going on with that new putter, and he's got to be ready to go for Thursday of next week at East Lake.
All right, and KP, Rory is a slight favorite to win the BMW Championship this week, looking for his 4th ever FedEx Cup. How do you like his chances ahead of this weekend, though?
Well, I like him a lot. I mean, he's played really, really great golf basically since the PGA Championship. He talked to him after the PGA, and he's like, I feel okay, but not great. But ever since then, it's been lights out. Obviously, he's won. He won the Scottish Open. He's been, close at places like the U.S. Open, the Open Championship. He was close last week. He was one stroke out of a playoff. So he's playing at a level that, I do wonder, Rick. I think this will be interesting to kind of talk about this weekend on the podcast if it plays out like this. I think Rory might be playing at a level that we still presume that Scotty and Jon Rahm are playing at. I think that's how good he's been over the last 3, 4, 5 months. The numbers are right there. His tee to green numbers are right there with Scotty Scheffler, and he's been a better putter. Has he been an amazing putter? No. He changed his putter last week at Memphis to try to kind of get something going a little bit, but he's going to be right there. My big play this week, Jacqueline, was Rory to finish in the top 20. It's a horrible number, but I am so sure of it happening that I don't even care about what the number is.
All right, and finally, guys, we want to get your pick to win. Speaking of Rory, Rick, that is your pick. Tell us why.
Yeah, Kyle did a lot of the hard work for me here. He also switched putters recently, but the stats don't show that he's a bad putter. He's actually gained strokes with the flat stick in 9 straight. And what I really love about this golf course and the way it sets up off the tee is it reminds me a lot of Oak Hill. It's a demanding golf course that asks you to be very long or very accurate. Now, Rory is going to go with the former, the very long side of things, and try to pick this golf course apart with his driver. When you look at the last 36 rounds, which is generally the most predictive time frame that you can go back and look at, for the vast majority of the year, Scotty Scheffler has held the crown as the best player in the world over the last 36 rounds. Entering this week, for the first time in recent memory, Rory McIlroy has edged him out. He's gaining over 2.5 strokes per round over the last 36. I think this is a great course for him. I think he's vibing, and I think Rory McIlroy wins the BMW Championship.
Well, Rick picked my guy. I'm going to go ahead and pick his guy and take Viktor Hovland this weekend to win the BMW Championship. I thought Viktor Hovland should have won last week at the FedEx St. Jude. You know, he played so well. He was awesome from tee to green. His iron play was, I think he finished number 1 in the field in iron play. The problem was he hit 3 balls in the water off the 18th tee. He lost over 4 strokes to the field. On the 18th tee box alone, Jacqueline, just those 4 shots off the tee box on 18, he lost over 4 strokes to the field. Only lost the tournament by 5 strokes. He was 5 strokes out of a playoff. So he's playing really good golf. He thrives at very difficult golf courses, right? I mean, one of the big stories for me of the entire year is, hey, Viktor Hovland has figured out how to play and potentially win major championships. That's not a given. That's not a presumed thing, even for really good players early on the PGA Tour. He's figured it out. Olympia Fields is a major championship test. I think Viktor Hovland gets it done and potentially moves to number 1 in the FedEx Cup rankings going to the Tour Championship.
All right, KP going with Viktor Hovland, and Rick saying that Rory is vibing. So that is like peak analysis for me there. All right, KP, Rick, thank you so much. A BMW Championship preview for us here on HQ, and CBS has got you covered into the weekend for the BMW Championship. Make sure you tune in Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern and Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern, of course, on CBS or streaming wherever on the go on Paramount Plus. And of course, you can hear KP and Rick on the First Cut podcast. In the latest episode, they're joined by Mark Immelman and Greg Ducharme. They're giving you more breakdowns of the BMW Championship at Olympia Field. Download and listen, follow all the things wherever you get your pods, or you can scan that QR code on your screen.